Oop, here we go. It's your weekly forecast, starting with June 23, 2024. My name is Oak with Absalom, the art of astrology and demon slaying. Here at Absalom, we are just a mirror. We're just delivering the messages that will allow you to recognize, oh, yes, I did feel that. And we're also very much here to hold the mirror to all the bullshit and turn that into something much better than it was. So let's drop into this week, which I'm titling 8 Toes Down. So it was the solstice last week and a full moon. And there's this immense heat wave that's happening all across the United States. And I will first direct you to the most recent episode I did with Eileen Nauman, who is someone that I consider to be a mentor, someone that I really deeply look up to as a spiritualist and just someone that is walking the path. And we recorded that episode back in the beginning of May, and it took me a while to edit it. And it's so interesting because as I released it this week, there were all of these warnings on the news about the weather. Now that we're in a space where climate change is becoming more and more of an imminent reality. And as I talk about Saturn stationing retrograde this week, which is kind of the primary layer of what is happening this week, Saturn has a lot to do with the immediate and imminent reality that we're all connected to. So while climate change is not something that you individually can completely change, you have a role in it. But Eileen's support and suggestions for navigating this particular period of history are very, very profound. So I'm going to direct you to episode 10, which is it's titled The Life-Saving Medicine of Our Times with Eileen Nauman. And so as I was saying, this week is centered around Saturn stationing retrograde. That is happening on Saturday afternoon, so Saturday, June 30th. And while that will probably bring some information internally, as planets, they tend to reflect the movement of our psychology and our emotional state, and also the themes that we navigate in our day-to-day. Saturn retrograde, while it happens on Saturday, we've definitely been feeling it for the past week at the very least, because Saturn has just been moving very, very slow. And everything, all the transits that are happening this week, they're not crazy busy, but they're all moving towards this Saturn retrograde that occurs at the end of the week. So we start off the week on Sunday with the moon entering Aquarius in the evening. And then right as it enters Aquarius, it's already in a conjunction with Pluto because Pluto's at the early degrees of Aquarius. So we have a very deep thinking and deep processing kind of Sunday evening. So you might be laying up in bed and just in a state of fermenting on something. You might be triggered by something. But the moon will be in Aquarius until Tuesday. So we have a full Monday, Tuesday with the moon in Aquarius, which is more communicative. It's more community centered. It's more gathering focused. So, just that social aspect that happens when the moon is in an air sign. I would say the most productive aspects or the most telling aspects of the week are going to be on Wednesday and Thursday, as Mercury is getting ready to trine Saturn. And remember, I said Saturn is stationing retrograde on Saturday. And this Mercury trine Saturn is actually probably going to just be very helpful in helping us ground into commitment, ground into those next steps that we need, those organized steps that we need to move forward. Saturn retrograde this weekend is going to have us look at where we are committed. And likely we're going to be looking at where there are holes. We're going to be looking at where there are things that are structurally weak. Another detail that makes Wednesday also quite busy is that Venus is square to the nodes. This is definitely a juicy detail for the week. And I think that more so from the lens of what's happening in the world currently. I was thinking a lot about what's happening right now between Israel and Lebanon. And just this morning, I saw on the news that Lebanon is storing weapons at the Beirut airport. So things are really amping up. This is very, big news. I think there's like a lot of exclamation points in the world right now. This Venus square to the nodes on Wednesday in combination with Mercury trine to Saturn. Venus square the nodes says we're looking at our allegiances. Mercury trine to Saturn says I'm committing to something. I mean what I say, and I'm going to say what I do. So there's a lot here. Last week we had that Russian submarine situation off of the coast of Florida, and coincidentally, a few days later, Russia and North Korea sign a defense pact. So, the astrology for this upcoming week is interesting with Venus square the nodes because we're looking at countries starting to form specific alliances. And I think with the square to the nodes, I'm thinking about the way that the United States loves to, say that they are in support of something, but they will do something else, right? So they have already started to limit the weapons going to Israel, but then they also say that they are in support of Israel if they go to war with Lebanon, from what I'm reading. So these are serious things that are happening, and even more imminently serious if we're just thinking about, being American, because of this draft that was proposed last week. And then there's another stipulation that was added as the sun was very much square to Neptune at that very last degree of Gemini, pretty much at the moment of this summer solstice, Senate Democrats suggesting for women to be added to the draft as well. So yeah, there's an imminent quality. And this is all important because Saturn is not just our own personal endeavors. Saturn is not just the success that we're trying to develop through the year. Saturn is not only our tasks and our responsibilities, but also what we are responsible to. We are responsible to the collectives in which we inhabit. And so decisions like this that affect large populace of people, it's interesting how this Saturn retrograde is occurring all at the same time this week. So there's definitely a lot to think about. And I think that as we oftentimes are met with our own, the worries of being successful enough or getting our tasks done or achieving what we want in like a year or 2 year period. Those are all things that come up with Saturn stations. So, undoubtedly, these are things that you're thinking about, but also, this is the big question that I have, my friends. So the question that I have about this Saturn retrograde period, which it will remain retrograde from June 30th until approximately November 28th. So what is that? 5 months? It's a pretty long chunk of time. And when Saturn's retrograde, we start to concentrate, and I really emphasize that word, concentrate, on what is most important for us. Saturn stuff is serious, and even if it's the stuff that we're avoiding, we have a very strong internal meter that we know that we must attend to something in our lives, right? And the challenge with thinking about things astrologically in these past few years is that the overarching collective reality that we have is much stronger than our desire for getting the bag. And so this is further reiterated by Neptune stationing retrograde 3 days after Saturn stations retrograde later on this week. So next week, Neptune stations retrograde. And you know what? They're in the same sign. So if I were to be completely honest with you, it is very blatantly obvious that our definition of how we see reality is forcibly going to change, and it will be confusing. And so this is not just like get your life together. This is not just like get your tasks in order. And it is that. It certainly is that with Saturn retrograde. But it is a lot more about this question that I have. How do we hold our light even when we ourselves are still finding it? How are we allowing ourselves to get to know ourselves in a world that is changing? Where do we find our through line? Where do we find our tasks? Where do we find our dharma in a world that is in a deep state of flux? How do we dedicate ourselves to a future that we don't even know what that future looks like? And this is the frustrating thing when planets that are completely opposite in nature are interacting with each other. And Saturn and Neptune don't even meet until next year. But that particular question of like, oh my God, like, where do I fit in this world? Does the world even want me to be here right now? I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but it's like, these are real questions that we have. And it's not like I'm making this up out of nowhere. We feel this. We know this, but we are stuck in the system that is like requiring for us to, work 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week or whatever. And so like, these are the questions that we ask ourselves when Saturn is stationing retrograde. We are asking about what we are committed to. And sure, we're committed to our survival, which is participating in capitalism, whatever, because we have to. We are required to survive if we are dedicating to our lives. But what does it mean to live well? And what does it mean to live in dignity? And what does it mean to live in relationship with others? And what does it mean to live in relationship with the earth? And like these types of existential questions happen with Saturn in Pisces, but it definitely happens when Saturn is in the same sign as Neptune. So we are allowed to get to know ourselves in these ways that are kind of outside of what we had previously thought were, the goals in terms of finishing school and getting married and having children. Like, yes, like this is all part of like a linear Saturnian path. And there's also the X factor of this very new future, this new earth that is being birthed right now. And there's a lot that also needs to shift, transition, pass away. And so how can we dedicate ourselves to something that we don't know just quite yet? This is the question that I have, and it is very hard to be in the middle of it, to kind of have to like wade, W-A-D-E, like we're wading. We don't necessarily know, but does it take for a draft to occur for us to step into action? As I was saying, this week tends to bridge into next week. And this contemplation that I am asking you all to entertain, it's something that's still going on for like another 2 years. So it just becomes heavier at this Saturn retrograde this week and Neptune retrograde next week. And especially that Saturn is retrograde all the way until November, it's like this is some of that deeper work, like the way that I think about Saturn retrograde periods, it's kind of like when you are reminiscing on a previous time in your life and you're like, wow, I can't believe that I used to think of myself that way. Or I can't believe that I thought that attention meant love. Or I can't believe that I thought that the way that I needed to perform in order to receive X was my mode of operation, right? Like you're reflecting on an older way of thinking. And this is kind of that invitation for maturity, the Saturn retrograde period. So it's not just this week. It's like for these next 4 or 5 months, it's like we're looking at like outdated ways of relating to kind of like the structures of our lives. And so, I think that there's other call for continued maturity in being able to look out at our external reality and be like, how am I best utilizing my gifts, my talents, my life force, my skill? And yeah, when we're able to find that, it is so magical. And ultimately, that is what Saturn always represents, is like it's this type of alignment where we feel like, oh, I'm doing what I need to do. Like for me, even though I feel like there's more that I could be doing in terms of activism, at least with my work, I genuinely believe that I'm doing what I need to do. And that's just me, post Saturn return, and like just continually asking myself about alignment, right? And because alignment is a Saturnian word, and I'm not going to go into like why it is, but Saturn is the energy of alignment. And so I will take this moment to let y'all know that I am still calling in the students who are ready to study astrology with me. My 12-month mentorship is happening on July 21st, so just in about a month. And I am always calling in alignment. I'm calling in the people that are mature and dedicated to their healing and like really want to learn astrology. Just because this program is super intense, so I'm calling in the people who are like, fully in, if that makes sense. So that is happening. There's more on my website. Check that out, oakastrologyschool.com. But as I was saying, Saturn has the energy of alignment. That is these next 4 or 5 months, is like what is aligned for you is not aligned for the next person beside you. It's not aligned. It's not the same alignment for like what your mom wants for you, or what you believe that you're supposed to be performing as. Like, these are much richer questions that take time for us to really drop in, to feel like, no, this is true for me. And sometimes we need to really tear ourselves up. Sometimes we really need to go into a darker space. When we're measuring decisions, we're looking at potentialities of like how we're dedicating ourselves and what we dedicate ourselves to, especially when we have full dedication. Like, it's not just like mental dedication. It's like heart and spirit dedication. It completely changes the trajectory of how we walk. And so like, that heaviness that we feel with Saturn stationing retrograde, and the heaviness that we've felt this week, and probably the heaviness that you will feel next week, it is the yearning to be in alignment, and the trusting and knowing that alignment doesn't come overnight is also the biggest medicine when it comes to working with Saturn at a station moment like this. So of course, we have a lot to think about, and that is why I am titling this week 8 Toes Down, because why would you know the answer right now? Why would you be fully committed at this very moment when there is more that needs to come forward? There's more of you that needs to fill that space. And sometimes that comes through like testing waters, through being in experiences that are so deeply out of alignment. They're so irking to our soul that we are like, oh, this is definitely not aligned, right? Like, it takes time for us to test the experiences that we have in our waking reality, whether it's through our job or our relationships or through social dynamics, where we witness what actually is in alignment, right? And, so it is that invitation of like really seeing what does it mean to walk aligned. I talk about this all the time, and this is one of those types of weeks where it starts to become a much greater internal question, and that narrative is just so strong. So thank you, my friends. I hope that this message was helpful. I'm just grateful for the community that's building through this podcast, and people that are just really, finding the grounding in these messages. They come from a really, a strong dedication to be in support and in service. And if you really find the value in these messages, please feel free to leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. These things are just a way to keep that energetic exchange like really flowing. And it also helps people find these messages. I know on a deep level, this is words that people are needing. And so, yeah, if you are interested in any of my courses, please check out oakastrologyschool.com. My Saturn return class is a master class. It's a really amazing class, especially if you're going through your Saturn return age 27 to 30, but I would say up until like 33 is super relevant information. There are a few different courses on my website. There's a full natal course. There is a transits and predictive course. There is a love and relationship astrology class, and that one is 3 parts. There's a business astrology course that is 4 parts. These are really very nice, very nice materials that I've spent the last 4 years kind of developing. And bless. I hope you have a beautiful week. Stay cool. And definitely stay grounded, my friends. And what I'm referring to is episode 10 with Eileen Nauman. Highly recommend checking that out.